The coffee mug exploded against the break room floor, hot liquid spraying everywhere. Brady Coleman had Jennifer Walsh backed against the counter, his arm blocking her escape, leaning way too close to her trembling form. Her eyes found mine with that desperate look I'd seen too many times. The same look my oldest daughter Emma had when some punk cornered her at a high school party last year. "Need something?" Brady asked without turning around, irritation dripping from his voice. I stepped between them, forcing him back. "Actually, yes. I need you to stop cornering women in this office." The silence felt electric. Jennifer slipped away, clutching her folder like a shield. "My name is Wade Morrison. I'm 49's Senior Compliance Director, and I wasn't about to let this slide, not after what I'd learned about this company. Not after what I'd seen happen to good people who trusted the system." Brady's trademark smirk appeared, the one that said he knew exactly what game he was playing. I stepped closer. "You heard me? Stop trapping women in corners. Stop making them uncomfortable. Stop touching them when they clearly don't want it." His eyes narrowed. "Who exactly do you think you're talking to?" "I know exactly who I'm talking to," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "The question is, do you know who you're talking to?" Brady glanced around the break room, making sure no one else was watching. His uncle's protection had made him careless, overconfident. "Look, Wade, I don't know what your problem is." "Barcelona," I said quietly, maintaining eye contact. The color drained from his face. That single word carried 4 months of investigation, dozens of conversations, and evidence he didn't know existed. "I know about Barcelona, about what happened on the hotel balcony with Carol, about the elevator incident with Nancy, about how you followed Susan to her room." His throat bobbed. "You're bluffing. The board meeting starts in 30 minutes. I've requested to speak." "Want to walk there together?" He bolted from the room before I continue. "Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone get away with terrible behavior just because they had connections? As a business leader for over 20 years, I've seen it happen more than anyone should. This is one of those stories that needed to be told. I'm not someone who typically stands out in a crowd. Average height, graying hair that Emma says makes me look distinguished, the kind of guy people think they've met before but can't remember where. This invisibility had become my greatest asset in corporate environments. As Senior Compliance Director, I review internal processes, analyze risk patterns, and ensure regulatory adherence. I'm good at my job precisely because I notice things others miss and because I understand how power really works in organizations. My background isn't typical for compliance work. I spent 15 years in corporate operations before transitioning to risk management, working my way up through manufacturing, logistics, and strategic planning. That operational experience taught me something crucial. Every system has vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities are usually protected by the same people who exploit them. 8 months ago, I joined TechVantage Solutions from a similar position at a smaller firm. The move was strategic, better compensation, proximity to the girls after my divorce 3 years ago, and frankly, a chance to work for what appeared to be a more ethical organization. During my first week, I watched Brady isolate Lisa Turner in the copy room. His body language, the way he leaned in, her obvious discomfort, it triggered every alarm bell I had. As a father of 2 daughters, ages 16 and 18, this stuff hits different than it might have 20 years ago. "Don't," my colleague Diana Foster whispered when she caught me watching. "He's the VP's nephew, untouchable. For your own career's sake, stay quiet." Diana wasn't just being cautious, she was sharing institutional knowledge. In my previous corporate roles, I'd learned that family connections in business create unique vulnerabilities, both for the organization and for those who challenge them. But they also create opportunities if you understand the dynamics. Over the next few weeks, I heard variations of Diana's warning from long-term employees. "That's just how things are. Nothing can be done. Keep your head down." The consistency of these messages told me something important. This wasn't just about Brady's behavior. This was about a systemic protection racket that had been operating for years. What they didn't realize was that keeping my head down wasn't an option. Not anymore. Not since the divorce, when I'd promised Emma and Sarah that I'd always be the kind of man who did the right thing, even when it was hard. 3 years ago at my previous job, I witnessed similar behavior from a senior executive toward a young financial analyst, reminded me of my daughter's vulnerability in professional settings. I reported it through proper channels, trusted the system, followed every protocol in the employee handbook. The analyst ended up transferred to a dead-end role in a different division, while the executive got promoted to regional director. That betrayal taught me something fundamental. Official processes often protect predators, not victims, especially when family money and board connections are involved. The day I decided to really investigate Brady was when I overheard him on a phone call in his office. The door was partially open, and his voice carried, "She's perfect for the Barcelona client dinner. Young, ambitious, won't want to make waves." I knew immediately he was talking about Jennifer, who just started the week before. The calculating way he spoke, like he was selecting inventory, made my skin crawl. So I began watching Brady systematically applying the same analytical framework I used for compliance audits. His pattern emerged with disturbing clarity. He calculated timing meticulously, ensuring privacy without appearing deliberate. He targeted specific demographics, new hires without established workplace networks, contract workers afraid for job security, single mothers who couldn't risk unemployment, and always women who had some connection to valuable client relationships. Most revealing was how he leveraged the company's political infrastructure. His uncle Richard Coleman, VP of Operations, had built a protective ecosystem through strategic hiring, selective promotions, and carefully managed board relationships. HR complaints didn't just disappear, they were actively suppressed. People requesting transfers got labeled as not team players. Push too hard, and you'd find yourself with performance reviews that questioned your cultural fit. I made myself invisible in the way that only comes with experience. 20 years of corporate life teaches you how to blend into meetings, linger in hallways at the right moments, and become the forgettable face people spoke freely around. I built relationships with administrative staff, maintenance workers, security personnel, the operational backbone that sees everything while remaining functionally invisible to executives. The breakthrough came when I realized that Brady's behavior wasn't random predation. It was strategic business practice, twisted into something much darker. Every woman he targeted had some connection to client relationships, partnership opportunities, or competitive intelligence. He wasn't just harassing colleagues, he was systematically compromising women who had access to valuable business information. This insight changed everything. It meant the scope was larger than workplace harassment. It meant financial irregularities, potential securities violations, and breach of fiduciary duty. It meant Brady had created legal vulnerabilities that extended far beyond HR policies. And it meant his uncle Richard was either willfully blind or actively complicit. The company retreat to Barcelona 4 months ago provided the opening I needed. 3 women had separate incidents with Brady during that trip, but more importantly, the international setting created documentary evidence. What Brady didn't know was that I speak fluent Spanish. Having lived in Madrid for 2 years managing European operations for my previous company, I befriended hotel staff who witnessed his behavior, who shared details about situations they'd been called to handle involving the American executive who liked young women too much. But the real breakthrough came from understanding corporate expense reporting. Every client entertainment event, every business dinner, every strategic meeting was documented through financial systems, and those systems showed patterns that Brady thought were invisible. I also began connecting with former employees who'd left because of Brady. Coffee meetings, lunch conversations, building a network of people with similar experiences, not for gossip, but for pattern recognition and evidence correlation. What I discovered was a systematic operation spanning 3 years, dozens of incidents, and millions in compromised client relationships. For months, I gathered information with the same methodical approach I'd use for any high-stakes compliance investigation. I wasn't building a simple HR case. Those could be dismantled by expensive lawyers. I was assembling a comprehensive business risk assessment that demonstrated how Brady's behavior created legal, financial, and reputational liabilities that threatened the company's fundamental operations. Then Jennifer arrived, 22 years old, first corporate job supporting younger siblings while their mother battled cancer. I recognized Brady's predatory interest immediately during her introduction meeting. The way he lingered after offering to show her around, tracking her movements in hallways, asking pointed questions about her family situation and financial pressures. As a father, my protective instincts kicked in hard. This kid reminded me of Emma in so many ways, ambitious, trusting, completely unprepared for corporate predators. But Jennifer's arrival also represented something else, the perfect test case for my developing strategy. If I could protect her while building documentation of Brady's systematic approach, I'd have both current evidence and a victim willing to speak on record. It was calculating, maybe even cold. But after years in corporate environments, I'd learned that good intentions without strategic planning usually fail. I'd warned her subtly during her first week, as I had others. Be careful about one-on-one meetings with certain executives. I'd mentioned casually when we shared an elevator. Always suggest having another colleague present. She'd looked puzzled, but I could see the information registering. Smart kids usually recognize warnings even when they're delivered indirectly. Brady's approach to Jennifer followed his established pattern with mechanical precision. First came the isolation tactics, scheduling meetings in his office rather than conference rooms, suggesting informal coffee chats to discuss her career development, offering to introduce her to influential clients at after-hours events. Then came the boundary testing, unnecessary physical contact during conversations, comments about her appearance framed as professional advice, increasingly personal questions about her life outside work. What made this different was that I was documenting everything, not just Brady's behavior but the systematic infrastructure that enabled it. Meeting room reservations that showed his preference for private spaces, calendar entries that revealed patterns in his targeting, email communications that demonstrated how he gathered personal information about vulnerable employees, expense reports that tracked his use of client entertainment as cover for inappropriate behavior. The corporate expense system became my primary investigation tool. Every business dinner, every client meeting, every strategic consultation generated financial records. Cross-referencing these against incident reports, employee departure dates, and client feedback revealed disturbing correlations. Women who'd been targeted by Brady at corporate events frequently requested transfers or left the company entirely within 3 months. Client relationships often deteriorated after events where Brady had inappropriate interactions with female attendees. More concerning was the pattern of financial irregularities. Brady consistently exceeded entertainment budgets during events where incidents occurred. Alcohol purchases were significantly higher. Hotel accommodations showed suspicious upgrades and room service charges. Most damning were the recurring charges to the same specialized catering company that provided executive-level service for Brady's private client dinners. My background in operations management proved invaluable here. I understood cost center accounting, vendor management, and expense approval workflows. Brady's spending patterns showed clear deviations from standard business practices, but they'd been systematically approved by his uncle Richard. Either Richard was completely incompetent at expense oversight, or he was actively facilitating Brady's behavior. I also began connecting with former employees through professional networking. LinkedIn made this easier than Brady probably realized. 23 women had left the company over the past 3 years after having direct reporting relationships or client interaction responsibilities that brought them into Brady's orbit. That's not normal turnover, that's systemic failure. Coffee meetings with these former employees revealed the full scope of the problem. Sarah Martinez, former marketing coordinator, he said client development required after-hours availability. When I refused his invite to a hotel bar meeting, my project got reassigned. Linda Rodriguez, former business analyst. He offered mentorship, then spent the entire dinner talking about his hotel room view and asking about my relationship status. Karen Williams, former client relations manager. After I reported him, HR said they'd investigate. Instead, they started documenting every minor mistake I made until they could justify letting me go. Each conversation added pieces to a larger puzzle. Brady wasn't just a workplace predator, he was a systematic operator who understood exactly how to leverage corporate structures, legal protections, and family connections to avoid consequences. His uncle Richard wasn't just enabling him. Richard was actively managing the cover-up through strategic HR decisions, selective legal interpretations, and careful board communications. But the most important discovery came from my international business contacts. During the Barcelona retreat, Brady's behavior hadn't just affected company employees. Maria Santos, a Spanish interpreter who'd worked the corporate events, contacted me through a former colleague who knew about my investigation. Her English was limited, but her message was clear. American executive, young women, problems that required hotel security intervention. She still had photos from the event. Corporate policy required documentation of any incidents involving international guests. The images showed Brady and Richard together, supporting an obviously intoxicated woman who wasn't a company employee. Timestamp, 2:14 a.m. Location, hotel corridor outside client guest rooms. The woman was Helen Brooks, wife of George Brooks, CEO of one of our largest client companies. This changed everything. If Brady had targeted a client's spouse, the legal and business implications extended far beyond workplace harassment. We were potentially looking at criminal behavior that compromised major business relationships. When I researched the Brooks account, I discovered that TechVantage had won a $12 million contract renewal just 2 weeks after the Barcelona retreat. George Brooks had insisted on the renewal despite competitive pressure from other vendors. His wife Helen had been notably absent from subsequent business events. The Barcelona evidence also revealed Richard's direct involvement. He hadn't just failed to stop Brady's behavior, he'd actively participated in managing the aftermath. Hotel records showed that Richard had requested room changes for several guests that night, paid for additional security presence, and arranged transportation for Helen Brooks back to her room. Most significantly, he'd authorized significant expense charges for incident management and client relationship maintenance. Armed with this information, I began building my coalition more aggressively. Not just among Brady's victims, but among business stakeholders who understood the financial and legal risks his behavior created. Patricia Reed, our CFO, had always struck me as someone who valued operational integrity over political connections. During a routine compliance meeting, I mentioned some concerning expense patterns I'd identified in client entertainment spending. Patricia's background was forensic accounting before moving to corporate finance. When I showed her the expense correlation data, she immediately grasped the implications. "This isn't just harassment," she said quietly. "This is potential securities fraud if client relationships were compromised through illegal behavior." Diana Foster became another crucial ally, but for different reasons. As a mid-level manager, she understood the day-to-day operational impact of Brady's behavior on team productivity and employee retention. More importantly, she had relationships with other managers who'd been quietly dealing with the fallout from Brady's actions for years. "You know what this really costs us?" Diana said during one of our planning discussions. "It's not just the legal exposure. We've lost some of our best people. Training costs, recruitment expenses, institutional knowledge walking out the door. Brady hasn't just hurt individuals, he's undermined our competitive capabilities." That business impact analysis became a crucial component of my strategy. I wasn't just building a harassment case. I was documenting systematic business damage that affected shareholder value, competitive positioning, and operational efficiency. Board members might dismiss employee complaints, but they couldn't ignore financial impact assessments supported by comprehensive data analysis. The final piece of my coalition came from an unexpected source, our corporate security director, Mike Torres. During a routine security briefing, I'd mentioned some concerns about after-hours access patterns and client event security protocols. Mike had been quietly documenting his own concerns about Brady's behavior, particularly incidents that required security intervention at corporate events. "I've got 18 months of incident reports," Mike told me privately. "Nothing that rose to the level of police involvement, but patterns of behavior that created security risks at client events. Problem is, every time I tried to escalate, Richard shut down the conversation. With Mike's security documentation, Patricia's financial analysis, Diana's operational impact data, and testimony from nearly 20 current and former employees, I had built something unprecedented. A comprehensive business case that demonstrated how Brady's behavior created systematic risk across legal, financial, operational, and reputational dimensions. When I walked into that break room and saw Jennifer trapped against the counter, something inside me finally snapped. All the methodical planning, the careful documentation, the strategic coalition building, none of it mattered in that moment. This was my daughter, Emma, being cornered by some entitled predator, and every paternal instinct I had screamed for immediate action. After Brady fled, I helped Jennifer collect herself. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Nobody's ever." "They all just look away." "Not anymore," I promised, squeezing her hand. But even as I said it, I knew I'd just accelerated my timeline and forced my hand in ways that might compromise months of careful preparation. I returned to my desk, heart pounding but mind already shifting into crisis management mode. 20 years of corporate experience had taught me that spontaneous actions, however justified, needed immediate strategic follow-up. Brady would retaliate, Richard would circle the wagons, and I had maybe hours before they launched their counterattack. The company network pinged with a notification. Emergency board meeting at 2 p.m. I hadn't actually requested to speak. That had been a calculated bluff, but Brady clearly believed me capable of it. More importantly, his panicked reaction told me he thought I had more evidence than I'd revealed that gave me a crucial tactical advantage. My phone buzzed with urgent texts from Diana. "What did you do?" Followed by "Richard is furious." Then Brady saying you threatened him. I could feel the corporate machinery spinning up to crush me, just like it had crushed others who'd challenged the Coleman family protection system. But this time was different. This time I wasn't a lone whistleblower trusting naive faith in organizational justice. I had built something much more powerful, a business case supported by documented evidence and backed by stakeholders who understood the financial implications of inaction. Instead of responding to Diana's texts, I sent the message I'd prepared months ago to my coalition. It's happening today. 2 p.m. boardroom. Bring everything we discussed. By 1:30, my office phone rang. The board assistant's voice was clipped and professional. "Mr. Morrison, your presence is requested in the board meeting." "I'll be there," I replied calmly, but my pulse was racing. This was it, the culmination of 8 months of investigation, the test of whether systematic business analysis could overcome family connections and corporate corruption. I spent the next 20 minutes reviewing my presentation materials, not for preparation, but for confidence. Financial analysis, security reports, client risk assessments, operational impact data, minus everything I needed to demonstrate that Brady's behavior represented systematic business failure, not just personal misconduct. The boardroom occupied the top floor with windows overlooking the city skyline. 12 people sat around the massive mahogany table, their faces showing various expressions of concern and annoyance. Richard sat at the head, his resemblance to Brady unmistakable in their shared jawline and cold calculation. "Mr. Morrison," he began as I took the sole empty chair, voice carrying the weight of executive authority. "My nephew claims you've created a hostile work environment, that you're spreading malicious rumors and making threats." My heart sank even though I'd anticipated this exact scenario. I'd risked everything and now faced termination, possibly legal action if they decided to pursue defamation claims. But I also noticed something crucial. Patricia Reed, our CFO, was taking notes and watching Richard's presentation with the skeptical expression of someone who reviewed financial statements for a living. Richard continued, consulting prepared notes. "Such behavior violates numerous company policies regarding professional conduct, chain of command, and employee relations." Before you continue, I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. "You should know I'm not alone in this." Confusion flickered across Richard's face. Before he could respond, the boardroom door opened. Patricia entered first, carrying a thick folder of financial documentation. Behind her came Diana, followed by Jennifer, still shaken but standing tall. Then more faces appeared. Nancy from accounting, Carol from graphic design, Susan from client relations. 5 current employees standing in silent solidarity, each carrying documentation we'd prepared together. Behind them came 7 former employees who'd coordinated schedules and traveled from as far as 3 hours away to attend. Women who'd given up vacation days and paid for their own transportation because they understood this was their one chance for accountability. Then came 2 more people who made Richard's face go completely pale. Helen Brooks, wife of our major client George Brooks, accompanied by their attorney. The board members' expressions transformed from annoyance to shock as more people filed in, lining the room walls. This wasn't just an HR complaint. This was a systematic business crisis that threatened major client relationships. "What is the meaning of this?" Richard demanded, half rising from his chair, but I could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. I stood to face him, drawing on every presentation skill I'd developed over 2 decades of corporate leadership. "You wanted to discuss hostile work environments. We all have stories, and we're prepared to tell them here today, or publicly, if necessary." The atmosphere in the boardroom shifted instantly. This wasn't going to be a simple personnel issue that could be managed through legal maneuvering. This was a full-scale business crisis with potential criminal implications. Richard's expression hardened, but Patricia spoke up before he could respond. "Perhaps we should listen before deciding anything. These are serious allegations that could affect our fiduciary responsibilities." "This is highly irregular," protested Stephen Miller, the general counsel, his fingers nervously adjusting his tie. "We can't just have random employees bursting into a board meeting, making accusations without proper procedures." "Without what?" Patricia interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of someone who testified before federal regulators. "Without enough stakeholders to fill this room, without potential legal liability that could sink this company's reputation permanently, without clear violation of every ethics policy we claim to uphold in our annual reports." Tense silence followed. Roger Davis, the oldest board member and former CEO of a Fortune 500 company, leaned forward. "I move that we hear what these people have to say. If there's truth here, we have a legal obligation to address it immediately." For the next hour, person after person spoke. No dramatic revelations, no secret recordings, just methodical presentation of facts that painted an undeniable pattern of systematic business misconduct. Carol described the Barcelona incident with clinical precision. Brady cornered me on the hotel balcony during the company retreat. He told me my promotion was being considered, that he had significant influence with his uncle. Then he put his hand on my lower back and said he had a nice view from his room he wanted to show me. When I refused, he mentioned that my project budget was under review. Nancy presented her documentation next. In the elevator, he pressed against me when we were alone. When I objected, he laughed and said I should learn to take a compliment. The next day, my project was reassigned to his department. I have email records of the transfer and the timing. Former employees shared similar stories spanning 3 years, each supported by documentation. Email communications, project transfer records, performance review anomalies, exit interview notes that had been mysteriously lost from HR files. Throughout the testimonies, I watched board members' faces transform. Roger Davis showed growing anger. Patricia Reed was taking detailed notes and cross-referencing information with financial reports she'd brought. Even Stephen Miller looked increasingly concerned as the legal implications became clear. Richard tried interjecting several times. "These are serious allegations without proper verification." "I wasn't finished," said Susan, cutting him off with surprising force. "After Barcelona, I reported the incident to HR. 2 weeks later, I was put on a performance improvement plan for communication issues. The original HR report mysteriously disappeared from the system, but I kept copies of all my communications." Then Helen Brooks stepped forward. The room went completely silent. As the spouse of a major client, her testimony carried enormous business implications. "I don't remember much about that night in Barcelona," she said quietly. "I remember having 2 drinks at the client dinner. I remember feeling strangely disoriented. Then nothing until I woke up in my room the next morning, confused and physically uncomfortable." She paused, gathering strength. "When your investigator contacted me about the video evidence, fragments started coming back. I've since had medical testing that confirmed the presence of substances consistent with certain drugs known to cause memory loss." The boardroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Roger Davis called for order, but the damage was done. This wasn't just harassment, this was potential criminal assault against the spouse of a major client. Patricia stood and addressed the room. "Before anyone says these are just allegations, I need to present financial evidence that corroborates these testimonies." She distributed copies of her analysis. Brady's expense reports show systematic irregularities during events where these incidents occurred. Hotel upgrades, excessive alcohol purchases, charges to catering companies that provide specialized services, all approved by Richard Coleman despite clear policy violations. Stephen Miller, despite his earlier objections, was now studying the financial documents with obvious alarm. These expense patterns, if they're connected to criminal behavior, we're looking at potential securities violations, shareholder fraud, and conspiracy charges. The vote was taken within minutes. 9-3 in favor of immediate suspension and independent investigation. Richard and 2 of his closest allies were the only opposition, but even they understood the legal reality. When criminal behavior potentially involves client relationships and securities violations, corporate boards have no choice but to act decisively. "Mr. Morrison," Patricia said as the emergency session concluded, "please have your coalition submit detailed policy recommendations by end of week. I'll be heading the investigation committee personally, and we'll need comprehensive reform proposals." As we filed out of the boardroom, Diana caught my arm. "How did you do this? How did you get all these people to speak up when so many stayed silent for years?" "I listened," I replied simply, "and I built a business case they couldn't ignore. People will risk their jobs for justice, but they need to believe the risk is worth taking." The next 3 days passed in a controlled chaos of meetings, legal consultations, and damage control. Brady was escorted from the building by security, his access revoked pending investigation. Richard remained in his office but was notably absent from all executive meetings. The atmosphere felt like a major corporate restructuring was underway, which in many ways it was. Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Parsing garage level 3. Now." I hesitated for exactly 30 seconds, then showed the message to Diana and Patricia. "Don't go alone," Diana advised, concern clear in her voice. "This feels like intimidation." I didn't go alone. I texted building security and arranged for both Patricia and Mike Torres, our security director, to accompany me. If Brady wanted a confrontation, it would be properly witnessed and documented. The parking garage was dimly lit as always, shadows creating perfect concealment for anyone wanting to avoid building security cameras. Brady stood beside his black BMW, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, eyes bloodshot, posture suggesting he'd been drinking despite the early hour. "You've ruined everything," he said, when he saw our small group approaching, voice slurring slightly. 20 years of family business destroyed by some nobody who doesn't understand how things really work. "You ruined yourself," I replied calmly, keeping my voice steady and professional. "I just made sure people knew the truth about the business risks your behavior created." He laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off concrete walls. "Truth. You don't know anything about me, about what I've done for this company, about the deals I've closed, the relationships I've built. I know about the Barcelona video," I said quietly. "I know about the expense irregularities. I know about Helen Brooks and what you did to her." Brady's face went completely white. Behind his shock, I could see the desperate calculation of someone realizing their carefully constructed protection was collapsing. Patricia stepped forward, her CFO authority clear in her voice. "The investigation starts tomorrow with independent forensic accountants and federal investigators. I strongly advise you to cooperate fully, and I strongly advise you to leave the premises immediately. Your access has been permanently revoked." Brady's eyes narrowed, focusing on me with obvious hatred. "This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with. My family has connections you can't imagine." "Actually, it is over," I replied, thinking of Emma and Sarah, of Jennifer and all the other young women who deserved workplaces where merit mattered more than family connections. "Your uncle resigned this morning." The shock on Brady's face was complete. He hadn't known. Richard had abandoned him without warning, cutting ties to protect what remained of his own reputation and legal standing. Patricia nodded confirmation. Richard Coleman submitted his resignation at 6 a.m., effective immediately. His statement cited personal reasons and accepting responsibility for oversight failures. Brady stared at us for a long moment, the reality of his isolation finally sinking in. Then he got in his BMW and drove away. We never saw him again. The next morning brought national news coverage. Tech executive dismissed following harassment investigation. VP resings amid Nephew's misconduct scandal. Brady's face appeared on business news channels alongside corporate statements about zero tolerance and systematic policy reform. But the real story was still developing. Federal investigators had taken over the case after Helen Brooks filed criminal complaints. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened an inquiry into potential investor fraud related to compromised client relationships. The scope had expanded far beyond workplace harassment into systematic business misconduct with criminal implications. Patricia called me into her office that afternoon. "The board met this morning," she said without preamble. "We're creating a new position, Chief Ethics Officer. It's a direct report to the board with oversight of all compliance, employee relations, and business conduct issues." She slid a formal offer letter across her desk. The title was impressive, the compensation significant, but what mattered most was the authority structure. This wasn't just a promotion, it was institutional recognition that ethical business practices required systematic leadership with real power. "We need someone who understands these dynamics from the inside," Patricia continued. "Someone who knows how to listen, how to build coalitions, how to identify problems before they become crises." I accepted immediately, not just because of the professional opportunity, but because it represented something larger, proof that systematic business analysis could overcome entrenched corruption when properly executed and strategically supported. 3 months after Brady's arrest, I stood before a room of 200 employees conducting the first company-wide ethics training session. "The most important thing to understand," I told them, "is that harassment and misconduct thrive where power goes unchecked, where complaints disappear into bureaucratic systems, and where victims are isolated from business stakeholders who can affect change." I paused, scanning the audience and seeing faces that reflected the diversity of modern corporate America, young and experienced male and female, representing every department and function. Our job is to create the opposite environment, where concerns are heard by people with authority to act, where patterns are recognized through systematic analysis, where business ethics and operational excellence are understood as the same thing. Jennifer, now thriving in her expanded role as ethics program coordinator, approached me after the session. "I never thanked you properly for standing up that day in the break room. "You don't need to thank me," I replied. "Just do the same for someone else when the time comes. And remember, you didn't need rescuing, you needed support. There's a big difference." That evening, sitting in my new corner office overlooking the city, I reflected on the journey. My revenge hadn't been what people might expect from a corporate thriller. I hadn't set out to destroy Brady or Richard personally, though their downfall was a satisfying consequence of their own choices. The real victory was systematic. Dismantling the protection structures that had made them untouchable, building institutional mechanisms that would prevent future abuse, and proving that principled business leadership could overcome family connections and corrupt networks. As a father, this meant everything. Emma and Sarah would enter professional environments where men like me, good men, principled men, experienced men, had fought to establish ethical standards that protected everyone. That was the revenge that mattered most, ensuring that predators could never again use corporate systems to harm people's daughters. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rodriguez. Brady Coleman pled guilty today. Won 18 months federal prison, $2.3 million restitution to victims, permanent prohibition from corporate executive roles. Richard Coleman accepted a plea deal for conspiracy charges. Your systematic documentation made prosecution possible. I smiled, thinking about the hundreds of hours of evidence gathering, the careful coalition building, the strategic timing that had made justice possible. The most brutal revenge isn't loud or violent or personal. It's when someone realizes that everything they thought protected them has been systematically dismantled by people who understand how institutions really work. Brady had relied on family connections, informal networks, and institutional protection. But institutions are just systems operated by people making decisions. Change the people, change the decision-making process, change the information available to decision makers, and you change everything. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Morrison, there's someone here to see you. Says it's about a situation at Consolidated Manufacturing that might interest you." I straightened my tie and smiled. Apparently, word was getting around that systematic business ethics enforcement was not only possible but effective. Good news travels fast in corporate America, especially when it comes with documented proof that doing the right thing can also be good business. "Send them in," I said. There was more work to do. The greatest revenge against institutional corruption isn't destroying individuals, it's building systems so strong that future predators can never find shelter in them. When good men with experience and authority choose to act strategically rather than stay silent, they don't just protect today's victims, they change the game for every daughter who will enter the workforce tomorrow.